Welcome to the Impact Learning Visionaries podcast, where we celebrate the unsung heroes of the learning and development industry. As always, we'll be bringing some laughter and a bit of fun along the way, but more importantly, you'll get some incredible insights, key lessons, and unique perspectives on everything related and possibly unrelated to training and development. Let's get this show on the road. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Impact Learning Visionaries podcast. Today, we have with us David Eichelberg, who is the Learning and Development Manager for Olympus Europa and comes with a wealth of experience in coaching and learning and development with various teams and individuals. Olympus is focused on developing human potential and offers varied opportunities for professional further development, including at international level. David believes that anyone who wants to keep up with the future challenges of the working world will need more than specialist knowledge alone, which is why he and his team are focused on the continuous personal development of their employees. And much of their focus is based on learning on the job, learning from others, and Olympus's offer of structured learning. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Really pleasure to be here.
Right, let's just jump right in and start by, just finding a little bit more about, of your background and your passion for learning and development and your kind of journey that got you to this point.
Yeah, thank you. Because it started really early in school days or university days. When I worked for the professor as a kind of tutor and took younger students and taught about statistics with them, and I always had the feeling that I can do more, and I like the idea of teaching not only children but also grown-ups and help them in their professional career. So then I got into consulting and training, did a lot of training in the realm of Volkswagen. And then that was for 10 years, and then I went to Olympus. The idea or the reason why I went from consulting into a company and into an enterprise was that I wanted to kind of support people for longer term. Because when you do a training in a consultant environment, you meet people for a week or sometimes longer, but then they leave and you probably never meet them again. But I wanted to support them and go a part of the way with them and see the results and see the impact that I did in the long term. That was the reason why I started with Olympus and been now there for 8 years or something like that.
Okay. And obviously, we're a big fan of that word impact, and I really love that kind of analogy and story of like moving from the kind of training space where you get to spend a small window of opportunity with people to train them, and moving into a space where you can follow them on their journey, and then it becomes this kind of more protracted learning journey. And curious to kind of hear from you in terms of that transition, kind of. What some of the joys of that process have been? What some of the challenges of that process have been? This particularly kind of your journey, transitioning from someone who's just the kind of consultant short term to actually now taking more of a vested interest in the kind of success and learning roadmaps of the people that you're working with.
Yeah, When I did the more training part, it was, of course, there were really bright moments when people understood experiences they had in the past, like they had, for example, difficult relationship with one of the colleagues or with one of the managers. Then when we talked about communication and talked about certain models and how communication works and things like that, it kind of turned the light on in their heads, and they suddenly realized, that's the reason why we always band together and things like that. But the point was that we now want to look into more, okay, now that you've understood it, what does it mean to you in the long term, and how does it affect your change behavior then, and how will it work differently afterwards? And this is a different kind of view, because of course we teach people like models or talk about skills in negotiations when they do have with procurement, for example, or with the customers, and how to have a good conversation with the customers to be more understandable. And of course, we want to see, does it work? When it hits reality, that we need to have a feedback, and we need to look at, okay, how does our models work as the moment they meet reality and real customers and real people? And that is, of course, a way that I find very interesting, when people like develop their own type of behavior, because we can only give them like general models and general understanding and tips. And then when they come back after half a year, for example, with their stories and their experiences and how they turn it into a success, that is really something that opens really my heart. Yeah.
And I'm guessing, I mean, it's got to obviously be a little bit more complex, because you now have the kind of needs of the organization that kind of have an impact on what you do every single day, and measuring, not just kind of doing one learning intervention, but looking at a host of different learning interventions with a host of different departments, a host of different divisions. I mean, tell us about some of the challenges you faced on that journey when you kind of first started.
Very fair point you are mentioning, because the thing is, we are a medtech company, and that means we are quite regulated in the terms of onboarding and in the terms of training. So if one of our territory managers, before he even meets the first customer, he needs to go through a lot of trainings so that we can ensure some kind of quality and product knowledge and sales knowledge and things like that. But as you already mentioned, we have like 60, 80, maybe 160 different roles in our company. And every one of these roles maybe is in a different development level. So we can't deliver development journeys like tailored to every one of the employees. So the idea that we have is win the people for their own development. So we can't deliver. I can't tell someone who's working in procurement what would be the skills and needs you will have in 1 year, in 3 years, in 5 years. Because I don't know procurement that much. And the same would be for supply chain, and the same would be for sales and distributor management. So we just need to win people for their own development. And that is the critical part, because we have done it in the past, but then people are kind of overwhelmed by the opportunities. So for example, we bought some LinkedIn Learning licenses, and then people go on LinkedIn Learning and see 140,000 courses that are available for them. So, and then they get overwhelmed by the vast majority, and probably everyone knows that by heart, that the knowledge and getting skills, it's all available at any time for you. But how do I know, and how do I prioritize? And that is where we step in and like help the people define their solution, define probably their skills and capabilities. They might think we have some stakeholder management or do some stakeholder interviews, and then get the first steps and have a rough direction, and then move on from there. But the challenge is, coming back to your question, the challenge is for most of them setting learning as a priority, because for most of them today it wouldn't make a difference, but maybe in a month, maybe in 3 months. But today it makes more of a difference if I call the customer back, or if I talk to my employee or something like that.
Sure. I mean, it's always such a kind of a fascination, because I also did that role through the corporate world and into consulting, and then in and out of startups, and I mean, Olympus by kind of industry standards is obviously quite a large company. So the kind of analogy I've always heard in kind of large corporates is like turning the Titanic, right? Is kind of trying to get everybody aligned, everybody on the shared vision, and as we now start to kind of get into this modern world of working, where technology is becoming a big factor in what's defining industry, what's defining the kind of work of the future, what's challenging businesses to try and be more innovative and creative and adaptable. Are you seeing these kind of trends starting to influence Olympus and influence the way that you kind of that the organization is starting to perceive learning and development, starting to kind of, I guess what I'm trying to also get to is historically, learning and development has just been another function of many kind of corporates, and the modern organizations are starting to realize how learning and development is actually becoming a strategically defining component in the business, because if they need to be successful in the future world of work, they need the capability to get people skilled up in some of the kind of tough skills that they need to be successful and navigate this complexity. Are you starting to see those kind of movements and signs in Olympus and in your industry?
Absolutely. And we touched that point already. Like we come from an idea of onboarding that took like 6 months, and then people were in their job and then worked from there until they retired. We have the idea of continuous learning. So people start their job, then develop certain other skills and competencies, and of course their job description might change as well. And we know that markets change, that customer needs change, so we need to adapt to these changes as well if we want to be successful in the future. What I also realize is that companies want to develop more into learning organizations and develop a kind of learning culture, and, as you said, not see it as a kind of luxury or add-on that we would do as long as the numbers are right, but to have it as a kind of prerequisite, like the we need to develop if we want to be successful in the future. I see that as well, and the critical point to us, as I said before, is how do I get it from our hands into our hearts and feet? So how do we do it then? And I hear a lot of people who say learning is important for the future, learning is important now, learn as much as you can. Learning is the thing that will help us survive, even though we're living in a VUCA world and we can't see the future, but having the ability to learn is something that will save us. But when we look into the schedules of the people, how many of them have dedicated time for learning every week or every day, or how they making a habit out of them and not have it not just being good intentions, that is really something different, and that is where we really need to intervene and win people there.
And I mean, it is, you talk about this kind of need to kind of you said win people over to kind of this kind of this time constraint, maybe there's a bit of a willingness constraint, whatever it is, it's obviously different for different people. But in terms of your view of the learning landscape, where are you seeing at the moment the biggest obstacles and challenges? Is it sitting at the organization level? Is it sitting at the individual level? Is it sitting at a kind of an ecosystem level? Is it in technology, or is it like all of the above?
Yeah. I mean, you probably answered it already, and it's all of the above. So we need to have to interlink, for example, a learning culture in the companies. So at the moment, we don't reward learning. So we reward sales numbers. That is something, or project results maybe, but we don't reward learning, and we don't talk about, like, there is in none of the team meetings there are 10 minutes spent for what did I learn last week, for example. That would kind of build on an individual level a kind of idea. Okay, it's important that I learn. It's important for me as an individual to learn, and my company cares about my learning. And that would be like the idea. And on the other hand, we need to be more aware of these, and maybe give more guidance to people what to learn and what would be relevant for them, and then needs the learning managers as well. That includes them to be more guidance, and this is something that we from L&D then, of course, need to have in focus, like to teach the line managers. Okay, how do you do a development conversation with your employee?
That's I mean, that was such an interesting insight, and that's why my eyes started to glaze over, because the hamster started running in my head, and I had to force myself to come back to the conversation. But it was almost like a kind of almost a throwaway observation, but I want to kind of bring it back because it's a really interesting one. Is when we go into our places of work and our organizations, and we look at just the nature of business. You're 100% right. It's about, we've got to make our revenue targets this year. We've got to make our sales targets this year. We've got to kind of manage our costs. And the learning organization is one that really understands and defines the importance and significance of learning. And yet, I think that observation you made is such an insightful and powerful one, is that we often don't really spend any time talking to each other about what we've learned, because we're constantly chasing the metrics, we're chasing the hard-nosed business stuff, and often the kind of the softer stuff, which is the things that glue cultures together, are seen as important, or as important as the rest of it. I mean, I think any kind of CEO or leader in a business today would acknowledge that learning is important, but it's almost not rewarded or acknowledged in the same way as achieving other business functions. And I know that's obviously because business is outcomes based. But I mean, do you think that's something that should change? Do you think we should start celebrating learning more, like recognizing and rewarding people for learning?
Oh, we could, and of course, I mean, you said in the intro, we look a lot on learning on the job and learning from others, and just to have the awareness and ask people on a regular basis, okay, what did you learn last week? And most of the people would say, well, not really nothing. But if we look in our company or organization, how it's been like a year before or before COVID and how it is now, everyone would say, of course we have learned. We have completely changed as a company. And then they would include learning. So we have learned a lot along the way. We're just not aware of what we have learned. And to understand how do I learn and how does this learning happen would then maybe help me systematize my learning habits and have a better view on it, and not feeling that learning is something of a burden, but it's kind of a nature. It is a part of me that I learn, and then that I'm curious and I adapt and things like that. So to not only make it a kind of maybe financial reward, but just remind ourselves on a regular basis how much we have developed, even though it doesn't feel like that for us. Yeah.
All right. I guess just then coming back to kind of Olympus and your role there. I mean, in the time that you've spent there, what do you perceive as like the biggest kind of impacts or shifts that you've made that you're proudest of?
The the biggest impacts or the most help that I can deliver is getting people to from shifting from good ideas to the first step. Yeah, and that is also like things that happen in coaching, in good coaching as well. Like people start with a wishful thinking or a future state model or an idea, this and that should change in the future. And we all have that, and a lot of people and companies stay on that stage and say, well, I really think we should do this different, or we should more listen to our customers, and everyone agrees, yeah, but nothing changes. And what I do then for corporate units or for the business units or for organizations or for people, individuals is, okay, what would be then like strip it down and break it down into little steps. And of course, we're talking most of the times about baby steps, because we need to chunk it down and then say, okay, if this is your future state, if you want to go there, what would be like milestones? And then we break it down. And the answers, there is also something I learned from coaching, the answer is always there. So ask a lot of questions and then start with the first step. And then it might be a baby step, but help them to see the first senseful step that gets them in that direction. And then sometimes you need to put more energy in it and have a follow-up and a follow-up and a follow-up and remind them, but then suddenly they understand how it works and the mechanics behind it. And then you see suddenly a train starting to run that is very, very good.
I would love to explore this idea of coaching, because I think what you've kind of highlighted is something I've noticed a lot is when people learn new frameworks, they lack the confidence to really kind of use them, and they probably lack the mastery of being able to adapt them to the organization itself. So I've seen it play out in so many different types of places where someone will come in with a new project delivery methodology and they'll say, well, this is the textbook, and we'll follow the textbook, and then people push back because it doesn't make sense. So it's part kind of building up confidence, part building up mastery, part change management. But I think you've wrapped it nicely in this kind of concept of coaching. And I'd love to kind of explore specifically, I think a lot of learning and development people will focus more on the learning side of the journey and like probably leave it to the leaders and managers in the organization to kind of possibly take it the rest of the way and assume maybe coaching is something that every organizational leader should be equipped to do. But it sounds like you guys have taken on an element of that responsibility in the learning journey within your business. Is that true?
And that has changed also. Like when I started with training, we kind of focused on, for example, knowledge and skills. Yeah, and we stepped back from taking responsibility for performance afterwards. Because I would, as a trainer, would say, okay, I could teach certain things, and maybe we can do a role play, or we can do some exercises during the training. I can see people have achieved that skill in general, but what they do then afterwards and the moment they meet their customers, that is not my business anymore, and I'm not responsible for that. And of course, we see that knowledge and skills is not even half the way. Yeah. So if we really want to change organizations, if we want to change people, if we want to change behavior, of course, understanding and having a reason for that is important, and giving people the knowledge and the skills for that is the basis. But I love a quote from Mike Tyson, who once said, "Everybody's got a plan until he gets a slap in the face." So the moment people leave our training and meet the customer, that is the point where we of decision, where we really need to look into. And we stepped away from thinking of skills and competencies and capabilities more into performance. So how can we improve performance, and how can we change performance afterwards? Because that is what is really critical. And knowledge is like ubiquitous. Knowledge is like everywhere, and giving people more knowledge doesn't do the trick. If we want to change behavior and if we want to have different performances afterwards, we need to focus on that.
Wise, sage words, and also great Mike Tyson quotes. Next time if you'd basically mimic Mike Tyson's voice, that would be greatly appreciated. But I'm joking. The other thing I'm quite curious about is just, are you guys starting to look at, any new kind of tools and technologies to kind of elevate the way people learn, or do you think kind of the learner management system having more kind of visibility? I'm open-ended question. What about, kind of the new technology landscape are you keeping an eye on? What are you watching? What are the things that excite you? Go wild.
Yeah, what we try to do in the past is like blur the lines between learning and working, and I mean, we've covered that topic already. Like there is no difference between working and learning, but we still have this kind of dedicated trainings where people come to a training facility and then set into the room, and then there is a trainer who knows more than any other, and then he teaches them something. The idea would be to be as you also do, like to be on the one hand more immersive and also more invasive into their daily lives. So we're looking for more like learning nuggets, little bits and pieces or impulses that we can throw into their daily lives. For example, they have a sales app, which is very useful for the territory managers because they find a lot of information for them, and use them as maybe a kind of push notice to say, okay, here are 3 things to remember for understanding how customers' needs. And then it would take like 30 seconds of reading. Or if they say, okay, this is a new way of starting a negotiation, or a customer asks for something that you can't deliver, how do you get out of it? And then something like that to have them more in contact with learning and be more, and make learning more a part of their daily lives and of their working lives, and to have it more very digestible and easy to use. That is something that we're looking strongly into. And of course, we're looking into, as I said, push messages, little videos, how-to videos, everything that we could use that doesn't need to be, where they doesn't need to have to physically be in a room. On the other hand, we're also, as probably we're looking, of course, into immersive learning, which would include, as I said before, a good preparation for meeting reality, and to not only rebuild reality, but have more kind of coaching, or aligning with sales managers. Okay, how does it work then with the customer?
David, following on from the kind of technology, I know that you guys are also starting to give some insight into some immersive technologies. Can you kind of explain to us kind of where you guys are thinking around immersive technologies, Web3, and how you might be kind of incorporating that into your learning and development and coaching?
Yeah, of course, because when we're talking about like the being more invasive in people's learning lives, of course we're looking into technology, and this is not just like how we reach people, but also how we can have like the learning experience itself be more intense or more impactful. And of course technology plays a major role, and I'm not talking about like this gamification thing, because sometimes gaming becomes like the only reason to have people in there, but to really understand how people, or what people learn through game and the immersive experience. And if we can then bridge the gap between what we have learned on a kind of theoretical side into how am I going to translate it into reality and behavior, and if we could use technology to close this gap and to give people a better understanding how it will look like in the future, their own behavior, then every technology is welcome. And at the moment, we're not looking too deep into that field, but it would be super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these technologies, for me, gamification, immersive technologies, I think it all has to really boil down to, does it deliver real, measurable value inside the organization, and does it, and often that comes with, can these technologies help you apply learning as opposed to teaching? It's more about application.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I guess just the kind of, as we're now starting to close out the session, there's two key kind of questions I want to ask, generally for our audience out there. The first is just, kind of looking at the experience that you've had moving from a company that does learning training into an organization where you're taking on this kind of broader journey with the kind of team in the company, where you're kind of, you're taking a vested interest in the overall success of people, and how the success is ultimately leading to customer success, and how the learning and development landscape is changing. And I don't think that you're unique. I mean, I think every business out there is dealing with these same challenges. So what I would love you to share is just, if you're putting yourself in the shoes of maybe someone who is still starting out in this field, who's kind of coming to grips with all of this complexity and this changing role of learning and development becoming a more strategic kind of component in the organization, what's the one piece of advice that you would like to share with people, or impart, that you think would help them at the early stages of their careers?
Probably be your own reality check. I can remember when I started out as a trainer, I took a lot of these, what comes out now as learning myths, like how do people learn, and this like 2010, or a lot of somehow learning myths. And I kind of repeated them in my trainings over and over again until they all broke down, and I suddenly realized, okay, I'm maybe I'm not really obviously lying in purpose to the people, but I'm showing them a reality that is not there, and be real with the people in your training. Don't underestimate them, and be a real help. And that would be my advice. Get the feedback, even if it's maybe not so good, but listen to them and understand what you're teaching them.
Very, very sage advice. And I think almost kind of mirrors some of the stuff we were saying about, kind of when we first learn something, we get infatuated by the frameworks and the concepts and the theoretical knowledge that we learn. But actually the reality is that we need to move to a place of mastery. We need to move past that. And that's where we get the real insights and realize it's often more about just the theory. It's about understanding that there's a human being in front of you who's got his kind of own worldviews and his own challenges, and the organization has its own challenges, and just being adaptive to that, and almost blending all of this, these kind of different frameworks in, and finding a very creative way to adapt that on a case by case basis to the people in the organization or the challenges in front of you. Brilliant. And final question is, we always like our guests to, in this kind of concept of continuous lifelong learning, is to share, if there's been a book or a podcast that you've listened to or read recently that's really had an impact on you or changed the way that you think about things or perceive the world. If you could just share that with us.
Yeah, and it was 2 books that I recently read, and they were about persuasive technology is one of them, and it's really the topic is for both of the books is how are we kind of persuaded by sites like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, you name it, to stay longer there as we originally wanted. And I thought I could steal some of these for my trainings. So to kind of lure people in training and keep them there even, and have kind of not psychological tricks, but maybe incentives, and get people to learn more than they originally wanted. So if they say afterwards, damn, I spent more time with learning than I wanted to, that would be then something as a kind of success for me. Yeah.
Is there any particular trick that you can share with us? And I use the word trick carefully, but any particular kind of insight that you thought was...
Yeah, of course. I don't want to manipulate people or things like that, but it's really, really basics. Yeah, incentives, for example. I have a kind of a language learning app, and sometimes I feel like I'm 5 years old, because like every little success that you make, you get a star, or you get some, or you become a advanced expert or something like that. And it's really sometimes easy, sometimes it feels cheap, but to be honest, it works. Yeah, it really works to get, okay, then the 6 more minutes, and I'll reach this stage for today, and then I get a bonus, or I get 300 more points, or whatever. But and we've talked about that before, like acknowledge learning effort, acknowledge learning time. Embrace it that people spend time with learning, even if it's just 6 minutes a day. And that is what they do very well, to acknowledge the effort and the time you put in learning. And that would be one of the five. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I guess that brings us to a close, David. I'd like to give you a genuine, heartfelt thank you for joining us on the immersive, the Impact Learning Visionaries podcast. And it's been fantastic talking to you. I think you've got a huge wealth of knowledge and experience to share. And
Thank you.
And I appreciate you sharing that with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Jason. It would be lovely if we could stay in contact.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Impact Learning Visionaries. If you found it interesting or helpful, please subscribe by clicking on the button down below so you don't miss our next one. Also, be sure to check out our Reality Bites blog for more information on how technology is aiding in learning development. Links are all in the description below. Go check it out. Thanks a lot. Bye.